Imagine a world where every new generation is born and given almost nothing. People grow up and are expected to discover fire from scratch, to discover electricity and antibiotics. I know it sounds ridiculous, but there is one way in which we genuinely live like this right now. We are born and then left to discover and invent our reality and sense of how our brain works by ourselves every single generation, life and time, as though there is not already a wealth of well-established science that can help us understand, navigate and change the way our own brains work. We never properly speak or teach of mental and emotional health. We make therapy basically inaccessible, and therefore we leave people at the mercy of the fate of whatever parents and carers they happen to have, and those are the people who are then molding our sense of reality, of our self-worth. And then we head off and pretend that we are all equal and we can achieve the same things, when we surely recognize that even within ourselves alone, there is such a huge difference between how intelligent or how stupid, how creative or how boring, how inspired or how disgusted we are by everything that we do, just purely depending on whether we are calm and loved and well adjusted and safe and secure, or whether we are completely anxious, overwhelmed, scared. The fact that there is such a huge difference between our performance in these two states, yet we do very little to address this difference, and we focus instead on other sorts of productivity and life guru techniques, is something that genuinely drives me nuts. Now, I've had my fair share of issues and also a genuine lifelong curiosity for how my brain and the brain of other people works. And so when this all culminated a few years ago and I hit a wall, I started what was at first an excruciating process of basically having to rebuild my sense of reality from scratch. I've estimated that between actual therapy and the work that I had to do in my own time about that therapy, and also all of the studies and books and textbooks and podcasts and videos and things that I have watched and learned and tried to implement, I have spent definitely over 600 hours in psychotherapy and trying to understand my brain in the last few years alone. I have very frustratingly put together and tried to make more accessible to people with potentially my issues who see the world like me, things that would have genuinely changed my life had I known them a long time ago. I've put these all together in a very specific, in-depth, intense exercise, which hopefully can help us use a lot of these methods in psychotherapy, because I feel as though as we progress through life, and especially in the beginning of our lives, we are almost put on these trajectories depending on our fate and what happens to us and how we internalize and interpret these things. And as Newton's laws of physics say, a body in motion will stay in motion unless force is applied on it. There is work that needs to be done in order for us to change these trajectories, and this I think is definitely possible, and there is an extent to which we can make it less likely that we go towards the fate that we were put on, or replicating the interactions or families in which we were raised. And I think what psychotherapy can do and what exercises like this can do is kind of pause that line, give us the tools and the frameworks in order to reset it and readjust. The main frameworks from psychotherapy that I will be using in this video are maladaptive coping mechanisms, differentiation, psychodynamic attachment, transference and countertransference, and corrective experiences. If any of these are new, I will explain them in detail in the video. Now, this is called the second life exercise because, as per the quote from Confucius, which I really love, every man has two lives and the second one begins when we realize we only have one. So this is the work to set us on a new path, hopefully. Everything that I will be mentioning in this video, you can download in a template below, which you can duplicate and use for yourself if you want it to be pre-prepared and explained, and also to support me, but there is no gatekeeping. Everything will be explained in this video, and you can just do the same thing by just watching along, basically. So now that all of that is out of the way, let's get straight into this 3-step process for the second life exercise. Let's get started. I've broken down this exercise into 3 main steps: collect, consider, and correct. The first step is more of a reflection and with guided questions, and the steps of consider and correct are where most of the work and the tools will be used and will come in. The whole purpose of the exercise is very reflection focused, and this has been shown to be one of the most protective factors when it comes to mental health. In a study by Mary Main, it was found that security, resilience, and the ability to raise secure children were all correlated with an individual's capacity to adopt a reflective stance towards experience. So from the very first step of collect, this is what we are trying to do. We are going to try and increase what Holmes has coined in a term of narrative competence, which is basically our ability to assess, articulate, and reflect upon dissociated and unverbalized feelings, thoughts, and impulses. So let's get started with my current version of this year. The first category is feelings, the second will be experiences, and the third is preoccupations. Starting with feelings, what I want to do is elicit and try to remember what are the main feelings that I have been experiencing this past year. For me, I'll probably have a bit of a negativity bias here, so I want to go for things like I've actually felt quite anxious this year, and I felt quite insecure, I've felt quite scared, I felt really stressed, really overwhelmed, I've felt sometimes unloved, I've felt confused, I've felt unwanted. So these are the sorts of feelings that I will kind of put on a full list. These are both descriptions of my internal state, and also a lot of them are negative feelings based on assumptions around what other people are thinking. So on one level, I might feel quite insecure and scared and tired, which is a description of my internal state. But in other cases, I also feel unloved or rejected or scared because of these reasons. And here we have a huge outlying factor, which for me is anxiety, which I can experience quite a lot of. And this is something that we're really going to break down later in the exercises. There's a lot of work to be done here in terms of recovery and changing and understanding what has happened. And I'm going to use a lot of differentiation, transference, and countertransference to explain this a bit later. But in the first instance, it does me very, very well to just put a name and to allow myself to remember feelings that I have felt consistently in this last year. As Michael Allen Singer says, the one who notices is already free. And I think the recognition of, okay, there's a slight definite issue here, and that themes are coming up again and again is the very first step in this collection. But swiftly moving on, I'm going to start thinking about my significant experiences in the last year. And this can be both positive and negative experiences. And I will kind of categorize them as negative experiences that happened to me that were very significant, and positive experiences that felt negative, because I have quite a lot of cases where people try to help me, for example, or people pay me a bit too much attention, or are a bit too kind for me, or offer to do something without me asking, or demand to know my needs and what I want. And even though this is a very positive thing, it can feel quite negative and overwhelming to me. So I like to identify what positive experiences make me feel uncomfortable and anxious, and this is very important for later. Significant experiences of the year can be wins and losses, breakups and connections, new friends, people who have been in our life for a long time. What I've kind of spent my year doing, as I'm writing all of these things out, I kind of get an idea of a trajectory, especially as I do this exercise year on year. I can see how things are shifting and what direction they are going in. If you have like different points of measure, you can kind of see the projections of where you are heading in. And if some of these negative experiences feel more intense, or if they are consistently still happening, or if they are worsening or not improving, then I can kind of consider and wonder whether this is something that I need to change, and I'm going to talk about how soon. But there is significant, quite scary data to show that people are almost set to recreate the situations in which they have been raised and how they have been made to feel at the time. Our future relationships tend to look like our parents' marriages. These struggles that we went through in our childhood very often are then replicated on our children and their experiences of childhood, unless there is work done to change this. And as the marriage researcher John Gottman found, in something that I like to ask all married couples who tend to confirm it, is that 69% of arguments that couples are having now are the exact same ones that they had 5 years ago, and are going to be the exact same ones that they are going to be fighting about in 5 years. So people tend to stay in their same patterns and not change. And it's not even our external circumstances which have the power to actually shift things for us. As it was found in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, a year after winning the lottery, people tend to be just as happy or miserable as they used to be right before winning it. It's not enough for us to change our environment unless we make internal changes. So this is where this experience is focused. This is a snapshot overview of how have I been behaving in the last year, and how has that been making me feel. Scarily is part of this adaptation level theory, which has been verbalized by the philosopher Alain de Botton in a very beautiful way, when he says that we don't fall in love first and foremost with those who care for us in ideal ways. We fall in love with those who care for us in familiar ways. And therefore, if we are unfortunately made to feel that some traumatic or damaging or non-ideal behaviors are familiar, we therefore tend to gravitate towards repeating these again and again. When I first used to do this exercise, the experiences were pretty much consistent, but they've changed so much recently. There's still a lot of work to be done, but the change is insane, mind-blowing. So I really would recommend the reflection alone. And the very last part is preoccupation. Now there's preoccupations and avoidance, where avoidance is minimizing the impact that something has on us, and preoccupation is kind of inflating or not being able to stop thinking about something. And I tend to be more on the preoccupied side of things, and therefore I try to kind of ask here, what are the things that have been on my mind consistently? What are the thoughts that I've been thinking and rethinking on? Words like rumination, if someone would ask you, what have you been ruminating on recently or in the last year, goes here. And if that leads to nothing, maybe asking yourself, what future events have I been focusing on a lot? Because this, for me, for example, tends to be a very strong form of preoccupation, especially when I meet people or I think like, I'm going to graduate, where am I going to be placed? What's that hospital going to look like? Am I going to be able to pass? Am I going to fail? Or in relationships or friendships, I tend to look a very long time into the future and create some very bad choices and conclusions based on no data, but all imaginary data, and then lead to bad results. And this wraps up our first step. So we have collected everything. This is a wealth of data and detail and a snapshot of everything that we have done in this past year. This is brilliant. I would definitely hold onto this because it's super valuable for what we are going to do next. We are now moving on to the second step, which is consider. And I warn you, this is intense. This is where we are going to start and implement a lot of these methodologies and mechanisms that I mentioned earlier. So strap in. This is going to be a lot of painful reflection. Let's get started. The very first thing that I'm going to do after looking at this list of feelings, after feeling sorry for myself and a bit pathetic, is to consider this list from an angle of differentiation. Now, differentiation is one of the most helpful frameworks that I have found, and I think Dr. Kirk Honda is one of my favorite psychologists in terms of explaining and using this framework a lot in the way that he manages his therapy and his patients. Basically, what differentiation means is the separation between what we are experiencing and reality, and even more importantly, what other people are experiencing and reality. Someone is highly undifferentiated, and I have definitely been this way in the past. They will believe that everything that they are experiencing is a true reflection of reality, which is not the case. So for example, when someone doesn't respond to our message, we are reading this as a form of rejection, and our anxiety and fear and rejection will rise really, really high. And if we are undifferentiated, we cannot realize that actually we are projecting onto the situation and reality might look like something different. When we have our undifferentiated glasses on, the world can be very, very skewed, very dangerous, very damaging, very anxiety-inducing place to live in. And the people that we are attracting, the way that we are making people feel around us, the relationships that we are creating, and our own personal mental health and emotional experience can be tragically impacted. If you watch my videos, you know that at the end of them, I always say, don't believe everything you think. And this is one of the reasons for that. It's something that I always remind myself that my initial reaction, my feelings and my emotions can be different to factual reality. And they can be different to the things that I consciously believe. So when I look at these feelings and I see that I have consistently felt like a failure or a very lazy person, which I do feel still every single year, I can then think, okay, is this a true reflection of reality based on data? Or is this something that has happened from a significant negative event? And significant negative event is a label term that I use because it helps me kind of understand what I'm trying to explain. Because the ways in which we are irrational are very often tied to significant negative events. If one person who has been very important to us, as for example a parent or a caregiver or our close partner in the past or our close friend, has called us consistently or at least convincingly something, for example lazy or selfish or stupid, then no matter how much positive data we have in our life, no matter if no one ever says this to us again, this can be the lens with which we internally perceive ourselves to behave. And so I know that a lot of these anxieties and a lot of these negative feelings are actually remnants of these significant negative experiences rather than a true reflection of reality. And as I step in with differentiation, I can re-reflect and reframe these experiences in a different way. Dr. Stone is someone who says this beautifully in "This is how you are" only means this is how you are in relation to how I am. The further step to this is seeing, finding, understanding, and implementing transference, which I will also do in detail in step 3, which refer to, in the case of transference, me projecting my feelings and thoughts onto someone else's behavior. So for example, in the instance of someone saying a joke or saying something negative, and then me interpreting that as they hate me, or they think I'm stupid, or they think that they don't like me, or they're going to reject me. This is a case of transference where my past person of significance who said these things to me then becomes the model on which I use the same models of thinking for other people around me. And countertransference is when I'm around people and I am internalizing their feelings. So when they're anxious, I'm feeling anxious, and that's why this is more useful for later. Next step here is one of the most powerful frameworks, which even in the consider only stage lessens my anxiety so much more than anything else and helps me process my feelings so well. This is something that I have adopted from, again, Dr. Kurt Kondo, shout out to him, he's incredible. But this is the view that anxiety is very often fear and worry based. So what this means is that when I have a vague feeling of anxiety, either in the year or associated to a specific event, but I use this on a daily basis with myself, when I am feeling anxious, I try to rethink and reframe it differently as my anxiety equals I am scared of something. What is that? And for example, before I filmed this video, I knew it was going to be long. I knew it was going to be in depth. I knew it was going to be very vulnerable. I knew that I'm not a psychotherapist myself. And so I was really scared to do it. So I was feeling highly anxious. But what then I did is try to reframe it and go, actually, I am scared of what? I'm worried about what? So I was scared of rejection. I was scared of failure. I was scared of being perceived as a stupid person. I was scared of being inadequate. So these are the specific fears that I'm worried about. And then also I want to break down the worry. So I'm worried it will flop, or I'm worried it will fail. I'm worried it will not help people. I'm worried it will damage my channel. So these are the things that I can then identify. And this process of transferring anxiety into specific worries and fears is really, really helpful, because it then really helps break down a lot of emotions, even when it comes to partners. For example, when I am feeling anxious in a relationship, I try to think, am I scared of being rejected right now? Or am I scared of being misunderstood? Or am I scared of being seen as unworthy? And these are things that become much more helpful in my conceptualization of the situation. Usually getting to the bottom of these triggers is very important, because they are common things that come up again and again for me. And I know that they sound very depressing, but I just need to deal with them, because otherwise they will never change. And therefore feelings that I feel ugly, I feel stupid, I feel inadequate, and these sort of beliefs are things that we really want to surface. I'm going to discuss them later, but if you feel that if these lead to beliefs or thoughts that you hold that you are unworthy, you are ugly, no one will ever love you, people will always leave, you shouldn't get too close because you will get hurt, you can't trust women, you can't trust men, you can't trust other people. If these are feelings that come out of these fears, it's really good to surface these here, because these might be the assumptions under which you're actually functioning without wanting to, and these are things that can definitely change later. Annette Botton says that we are judged on the behaviors that our wounds inspire rather than the wounds themselves, and this is very, very true. So this is what we're trying to find here, the wounds first rather than just the behaviors. Now my experiences of the year I will break down into familiar negative experiences and corrective experiences. Familiar negative experiences is kind of my term, but corrective experiences is a very well-known psychodynamic term which is used by a lot of people. And I will divide all of my negative experiences of the year into these two groups. So familiar negative experience is something which is objectively bad. You have been made to feel unworthy. You have been made to cry. You have been made to feel sad. You have someone shout at you or say something bad to you, but it felt familiar. This is the key thing here. So these are, I think, the experiences that I tend to seek, and the mistakes that I tend to replicate, and the situations which I tend to do again and again. If a parent or a caretaker had a narrative or a habit of calling me something, it might feel familiar for me to experience a situation which makes me feel in the same way. And this is very dangerous, but it can be something that I tend to gravitate to naturally because I'm familiar with it. So I want to identify what experiences fall into this category, and also then what self-beliefs I have because of this. And on the other hand, I want to identify what are corrective experiences. Now, corrective experiences are mainly for part 3, but these are things that give us specific data which is more realistic and can change our negative beliefs. For example, if you think that you are unlovable or cannot be conditionally loved by anyone and rejected by everyone, if you have a relationship of true unconditional love, that is a corrective experience, because eventually, especially if we're intentional in paying attention to what is happening to us and happening in that relationship, it can cure this wrong belief and therefore completely change our perception of ourselves, the reality, and the world. So there will always be corrective experiences. Now they are intentional for me, and I'll talk about that later, but even accidentally there can be cases where suddenly someone is actually really kind to you, or someone just gives you the opportunity to grow in a certain way, or gives you space and respect. This is a corrective experience that can feel quite painful, but we want to mention here. As Bowlby explained, if our early involvements have been problematic, then subsequent relationships offer second chances, perhaps affording us the potential to love, feel, and reflect with the freedom that flows from secure attachment, something that we might have been denied. There are endless questions I want to add to this category. They'll be in the template because I wouldn't be able to go through all of them now, but some that are very significant here too are a true answer to the question of, do I feel that I deserve the love and the peace that I need to be happy? The answer to which genuinely for me is still no, but I'm working on that. And then how from there kind of narrowing down onto how I deny myself things in these experiences that are positive and why perhaps. Preoccupations can be incredibly powerful and very difficult to change, especially when they have been established for a very long time or in a significant way. There are very strong cortisol pathways which are established when we have a pattern of thinking or believing something or even feeling something that we don't want to verbalize because we know is irrational. And as Dr. Loretta also said, you activate these pathways without conscious intent because your electricity flows where it has flowed before. So the things that my mind automatically jumps to and the things that I automatically ruminate on are the things that I am preoccupied with this year. And this is very important to surface. When it comes to considerations around my preoccupations, I will just ask myself the very simple question of what good has come out of these ruminations or thoughts. And it's always negative. It's always either nothing has come out of them and they've been a waste of time, or they've just increased my anxiety, but very often bad things will come out of them because I will make stupid decisions and stupid choices and act very irrationally because I am driven by 2 hours of overthinking on something that I just want to fix by ending it. So they're quite bad. But I think just reminding myself here at the step that this is not good and I need to not fall into these same cortisol pathways of thinking is super important. So now we're moving on to step 3, which is correct. And this has to do a lot with work that needs to be done consistently in the future and decisions and reframing that can be done at the time of making this exercise. So starting from the emotions, I have already divided them from their source of being either people or being activities and inanimate things or events. So when it comes to people, if there are names that are coming up again and again for triggering certain negative feelings in myself or anxieties in myself, I will ask myself, am I safe to discuss this with them? Because there are situations in which it's actually unsafe to express your needs and what you're feeling, but in the majority of cases, hopefully we are safe to express these things. I will then almost always make an attempt to express my feelings. There are people who are quite receptive to this. I'm going to explain the language that I use, and there are people who are not receptive to this. The people who are not receptive to this, we are no longer in each other's lives because it's just not healthy for anyone for these situations to continue, especially when the needs have been made explicit and clear. I find, at least in my case, if the name is coming up again and again and the strong negative feelings are significant, then this is probably someone who is actually quite close to me, and we would hope that people who we are close to want the best for us and have good intentions, and we want to spend a lot of time in the future still together. And therefore, it's really important here for me to verbalize my feelings. Whenever I'm feeling something strong and negative again in the future, I go through a process of first differentiation and realizing this is how I'm feeling, this is potentially not what's happening right now, and 2, transference of thinking, is this what they actually said, or is this my skewed perception of reality on what has happened or how they feel? And 3, I will very often straight up ask them and say, sorry, I'm actually feeling quite bad right now, or could you just reassure me that we're okay? Or if when you said that, it made me feel as though you didn't like me or you didn't want to be friends or whatever. Is that true? And these people most likely will just go, oh my God, no, absolutely not, don't worry. And then I've solved that in the moment. And I think the more that I exercise this muscle, the closer I come to healthy perceptions of myself and rewriting what has happened in my past. And also slightly nice thing to mention here is also the countertransference, which is when I'm in a situation and I'm feeling quite anxious, it can be the other person who's actually feeling that way. And if I recognize this, I will go, is this coming from me or is it coming from them? And I can ask them straight up and be like, sorry, it looks like you're a bit worried. Is everything okay? And then they can explain things and you can kind of relieve them of that pain too. So this is a really helpful interaction in terms of dealing with my feelings when it comes to people. When it comes to activities, this is a bit more difficult because YouTube can't do anything for me, and I think in this case it's just a case of collecting data. So if I have a video which I'm particularly anxious about, I might create a very long list of reasons why I'm actually not an unworthy person, or I might just re-look at this list and go, I'm fine, or just open my YouTube channel and go, it's okay, it's fine, like nothing has like gone crazy here, it's fine, it's okay, it's probably going to be okay. And I think this grounding to reality just helps me process this a bit better. Again, having gone through the anxiety first. So from anxiety to verbalizing what the actual fear is, and then kind of correcting that fear with real proof and real evidence from life. The next step of correction is potentially, I think, just the best and more fun one to do, which is to seek corrective experiences actively. There's very interesting studies on our propensity and power to change. For example, one very interesting study found that those over 50 who showed a high degree of resistance to change were 26% less likely to feel optimistic about their futures. So even in feelings alone, it can have a huge impact. Basically, seeking corrective experiences is that core part of breaking the pattern and breaking the trajectory. If you find that you are constantly surrounded by friends and co-workers and managers and in relationships with people who don't treat you too well, who don't really care about who you are as a person, who don't show you unconditional love and support, who don't try and build you up and support you and make you feel loved and cared for and have your needs met and kind of build each other together in a way that is pure and lovely and a beautiful experience of life, this is probably because you are on a pattern of doing other things which are just not great. And I feel so passionately that we do not need to continuously be denied something just because we were unfairly denied it when we were younger or because we never had it before. And this is the core part of rebuilding our reality, has to do with corrective experiences. I see this as resetting my worth and my value meter. And there is just so much things that I thought that were absolutely not true and that I need to work to reestablish and change my reality. For example, the thought that all relationships people fight and it's completely normal, that people can degrade you and demean you and that's completely normal. People can assume that they know who you are and what you want, that people can expect what you do with your life and with your body and do not need to ask you about your opinion about this thing or not even consider that you might have a different thought, that you are not supported and hated, and all of these things are just normal. They're just normal variations of life and we need to take it and deal with it. It's just absolutely not true. I don't know how much my mind has been blown in this process of understanding, even on the basic level, that there is such a thing as couples who respect each other, that there is such a thing as parents who are kind to their children, that all of these things were absolutely incredible and mind-blowing to me. And on top of that, the feeling, which I alluded to slightly earlier, of thinking that you actually deserve this just by virtue of being human and that everyone deserves this and you can actually get there, is, I think, the biggest mindset shift and what these corrective experiences are about. Dr. Loretta also explained, you can stop a vicious cycle in one instant. Just resist the do something feeling and live with the cortisol. This is difficult to do because cortisol screams for your attention. If you build the skill of doing nothing to your cortisol alert, even as it begs you to make it go away by doing something, this is what gives your brain the chance to activate an alternative. A virtual cycle starts in that moment. And this is about sitting through the pain of rejecting what our body wants us to do and instead doing something else and rebuilding correct experience, collecting correct healthy proof in the world for the things that everyone basically deserves. So, for example, back to those beliefs that we held earlier, that you are unworthy or that you cannot be trusted, or that, for example, all women cannot be trusted. And I know quite a few people who hold this belief to be true, and it genuinely does impact their perception of reality and their life. And this is a good space where you can seek a intentional corrective experience. So for example, if there is one person, like one old lady who's lovely, a bit lonely at work, and if you can kind of get closer to this person and genuinely get to know them and keep an open mind, and therefore if you can just get one set of experience that actually maybe it's not all women, maybe it's the people that I've known, and actually there was this one person who was really, really nice, and then kind of building from there, you can intentionally seek to collect evidence for things that contradict our negative self-beliefs that are holding us back. And whenever we feel that we can't get too close to people because then they will hurt us and reject us, it's not true. There's a lot of people who are incredibly close and they're doing fine, and there's nothing wrong with these things. You just need to find the right environment in order to be safe to experience and understand these feelings. The safest place that I had for this initially, because I was very, very resistant to corrective experiences, was therapy itself. I know it's a very privileged thing. I got it through the NHS, but we don't have to impress the therapist or reassure them of our sanity. We need to tell them what's going on. There's no need to stop them thinking we are perverted and or terrified. This may be the first and perhaps the last human we have been properly honest with. And I think therapy gives this very, very safe space to explore your emotions, be validated for your emotions, have someone who can be secure and a firm base for you to kind of go out into the world. The way that this is explained in psychotherapy is that when you are a child, you need to have a safe base at home where in a parent, for example, where then you can go and explore and you can see little children just come back to their parents' reassurance and go explore some more. And I think when you have been denied a very firm or a safe space to go back, a therapy can do this to yourself as an adult, where you're like, I want to try things out in a world and I want to be less anxious, but I'm scared that I need to have all my bad coping mechanisms around me in order to survive. But therapy can be that foundation where you can go, okay, I can touch down, come back to sanity with someone who can show me what well-adjusted and security is, and I am free, therefore, to explore my world and learn a lot more and seek more of these corrective experiences in the safety of knowing that you have some base to touch upon. And that can be this, but if we're fortunate enough, it can be friends, it can be family members, it can be partners, it can be people who genuinely we feel have our best interests at heart, with whom have the patience and the understanding to just let us express our emotions and therefore support us on this journey. I also focus quite a lot on my insecurities, actually, and I don't think it makes me sadder. I think it makes me understand how these patterns of thinking then let me be treated in certain ways or attract certain ways of being treated, and then I can recognize this very quickly and kind of adapt to them differently and stop an interaction or draw a line somewhere when I know this is my instinct, this is my behavior, and eventually my instinct will match my positive behavior and becoming more positive from what it currently is. I can now also say that I finally have very healthy relationships in reality, which of course are important because they are relationships, but also unintentionally are corrective experiences for me because they are resetting things that I didn't have and was denied in for my life so far. So that's been very, very important. The next very strong corrective activity for me is finding my why. And if you made it so far in this video, we're probably quite similar, but there's something that Alain Zapoton said. Actually, let me try and find it. Which was, we may think of egoists as people who have grown sick from too much love, but in fact the opposite is true. An egoist is someone who has not yet had their fill. Furthermore, he also said that our will to tackle what may in reality destroy our lives is sapped by background fear of being self-indulgent. And I think if we are similar, we might be quite anxious and worried that we are quite being self-obsessed and thinking about ourselves too much when we are doing these activities, and therefore this kind of low self-esteem might also lead to us not wanting to actually fix things because we think that we don't deserve to be fixed, or that the things that are happening to us are because we deserve them, etc., which is absolutely not correct. Finding a reason that you would want to actually put the work in, because it's a lot of work. Doing this exercise is very triggering, it's quite difficult, it takes a lot of time. Watching this video takes a lot of time, like, respect if you're here, but actually implementing these and getting the confidence to say to people that you don't want to talk to them anymore, or that being vulnerable in expressing, this actually made me feel a bit insecure, or actually I'm feeling quite scared right now, or I'm feeling quite worried that we're not okay. This is very vulnerable and very difficult to do, and finding the bravery to do this has to have a strong reason, I think. The trigger for me was realizing the statistics of just how much people are recreating their childhoods for their children, almost unavoidably, and their parental relationships for themselves, and recreating these dynamics in a lifelong way, which just terrified the hell out of me. And I thought I would not live that life. I couldn't do it. And I think that was a very strong trigger. So for me, when things shifted from never wanting to be a mom to definitely really wanting to be a mom. So the thing that grounds me and gives me the energy to do these things and to spend money and time on doing these things, and to have difficult conversations and to make more difficult choices instead of staying on the trajectories that I'm on, is the fact that I want my children to be happy, and I want them to be well-adjusted, secure, safe, and to be set up for the best possible things in life emotionally, which I think is one of the most important things. And that therefore leaves this work for me to do before I become a parent, which hopefully will happen at some point. So this is the thing that grounds me and makes me want to do this. So I think finding the equivalent for you, which might just be, I don't want to end up where my parents have ended up, or where I think I'm going, and I want things to change, or I'm just not feeling great, I just want the anxiety to stop, or I don't like this, I don't like living this way. And I think this can be a strong grounding element to implementing change and to trying to do these things. There was a study in Finland which found that it was incredibly more effective for people to implement positive changes in their physical health when they were giving personalized recommendations or personalized risk scores. So I think doing this, even the collection alone, and seeing where the trajectory is every so often, you can kind of go, oh, I should change, and that's a source of extra energy that I would recommend. Lastly on this point, another source of energy from unconditional parenting is that people don't get better at coping with unhappiness because they were deliberately made unhappy when they were young. And I think I used to think this in the past, where I thought that I'm just going to be stronger if I'm, sitting in struggles, and I'm strong because I've struggled, and I wasn't strong. I was a mess, and I might seem strong, but I wasn't strong. And I don't think, like, learning to cope with unhappiness and learning to actually change things is where we become better at coping with it rather than sitting in it. That's not coping with it. So this is really important. The last two corrective changes is a realization that anxiety is fear. And whenever I'm anxious, I think, what am I terrified of? And it's a result. And I can use my data collection and my reason to reason myself out of it to some extent. I'm not saying I'm not anxious, but to some extent, it helps alleviate that. And I think these are things that happen very slowly. And in the long term, there's definitely a progression of less anxiety in general and overall. And lastly, it is finding the language that you need, because especially if you're like me, I struggle with words. I don't know what to say. I kind of know that I don't want to do something, but I don't know how to say it. And it's not magic. There's no extra words here, but the significant difficulty of finding the correct words to express one's needs is so huge, especially if no one's ever asked you what you want or what you need right now. You're not going to be able to say it, even though it's the exact same words that you use in everyday language. A few of my therapists have confirmed this, that patients struggle with this so much, and a lot of my friends have confirmed that they struggle with this so much. So every year I create a list of phrases that I want to use more that year. And this year for me, if you're curious, they are, I'll think about it, I'll get back to you, I wish I could, I need some help, I'm not feeling too good, do you have a moment for a call, I need to go now, I need some more time for this task. So these are my phrases, and I think I wish there was a book that had just phrases like this that I could use and adopt, but just getting into the habit of using these more and correcting for some of my current patterns of behavior is very, very helpful. Now, as I wrap up this video, you probably noticed I mentioned a whole lot of quotes and learnings from books in here. And especially in the last few years, I've been focusing a lot on psychodynamic books and kind of mental health high-level theory and things like that. And also a lot of other normal books, which I've decided in this new year to create a little book club where I kind of explore these books in a very chill environment. There's no cuts in these videos almost. I just sit down, talk about my favorite parts of them and what I've learned and my opinions and how I implement these things, and kind of an overview of the book in general. And it sounds long and rambly, like this video, which probably doesn't do too well for the YouTube algorithms, but for that reason, I'm uploading them onto an ad-free platform, which is Nebula. Nebula is a platform which has been put together by other educational creators where we can put our content somewhere that doesn't have an algorithm, that doesn't have ads, that people can just come and watch what they want and then leave, and without the overwhelm of platforms like YouTube, which I do love, of course. But this is a very safe space for me to show things in a little smaller environment. It costs the price of a takeaway for a whole year to have access to Nebula. And the best way to get access to it actually is to go through CuriosityStream, which are very kindly sponsoring this video. Now, CuriosityStream gives you access to Nebula, but by itself, it's just a documentary platform, and it has thousands and thousands of documentaries. Fun fact, documentaries were actually my happiest escape from reality when I was younger, and I used to love to watch them in my grandma's bedroom on her very teeny tiny TV. So it kind of reminds me of that escape and more innocent times, and so I really like to watch them still. They have a very different dynamic, I think, and pace to YouTube videos and movies, so I really like the education but also the experience that I get when watching them. So if you're also a fan of documentaries or would like to be one, if you subscribe to both CuriosityStream and Nebula for the price of a single takeaway for a whole year, you can have access to some other forms of education which might kind of redirect your online learning behavior or online watching patterns, and also give you the opportunity to maybe join the book club if that sounds like something that you are interested in. And one last thing, this is not sponsored, but Shortform has some really good summaries of some of the books I mentioned, including some exercises which are similar to mine, just in different kind of tangents. So I will be linking Shortform in the description. You should get a discount or a trial time with that link, and you can test it out if it's something that you want to look into. But otherwise, I'm going to end this very long video here. I hope someone else is here, because genuinely I don't think I've made a longer video before, and so I should probably stop talking for that reason. But basically, thank you so much if you watched this far. I appreciate you more than I can actually say, and I genuinely hope from the bottom of my heart that this helps if you do this, and that things change for you, and that you become like closer to the person and the life that you want to live, and that definitely all of us deserve. And I hope that you are lucky in the people that you run into and in the situations that you are in and in what the algorithms and everyone else puts in your path, and hopefully we can have happier lives, especially for future generations and for our children. So yes, on that note, I'm going to end this video right here. So thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful, genuine rest of your day, your life, and everything. Wishing you all the best, and don't believe everything you think. Thanks. Bye.